Nearly 3,000 years ago, a blind poet named Homer documented the aftermath of the Trojan War. He focused his second epic on Odysseus, the Greek tactician whose intellect had cracked the city's defenses and won the decade-long siege. With the war finally won, Odysseus gathered his elite forces. They loaded an armada of ships and pushed off from the smoking shores of Troy, packed with hardened veterans ready to sail back to their homeland of Ithaca. But fast forward 10 years, and the image of that conquering hero is gone. Instead, an exhausted, completely naked man washes up face first on the foreign beaches of Scheria. His invincible fleet has vanished into the ocean. Every single member of his crew is dead. And back home, his kingdom is currently occupied by over 100 hostile men consuming his wealth. Inquisitive. This is the story of how the smartest tactical mind in Greece lost an entire military force to the sea, leaving him as the sole survivor. The trouble began almost immediately after leaving Troy, with a string of costly missteps. The fleet suffered heavy casualties in a botched raid against the Ciconian tribe, and nearly lost men to a powerful amnesia-inducing narcotic on the island of the Lotus Eaters. But the first major mythological threat arrived when they stumbled into a cave owned by Polyphemus. This giant Cyclops quickly sealed the entrance with a massive boulder and began eating Odysseus's elite warriors 2 at a time. Realizing they couldn't move the boulder by force, Odysseus used his intellect. He got the giant drunk, told him his name was Nobody, and waited for Polyphemus to pass out before plunging a sharpened wooden stake straight into his eye. The blinding allowed the Greeks to escape, but as their ship pulled away, Odysseus's pride demanded recognition. He shouted his real name back to the bleeding giant. That single moment of vanity sealed the fleet's fate. Armed with his attacker's true identity, Polyphemus prayed to his father, Poseidon, who retaliated by placing a 10-year curse on the Greek fleet. Even with a curse on their heads, they almost made it home. The wind god Aeolus gifted Odysseus a leather bag containing the power of the ocean winds, propelling the fleet so close they could see the shores of Ithaca. But while Odysseus slept, his crew's suspicion took over. Believing the bag was actually filled with gold, they tore it open, unleashing a hurricane that blew the entire fleet far back out into the uncharted ocean. Blown totally off course, the ship docked in a hostile harbor where they were immediately ambushed by Laestrygonian giants. These giants hurled massive boulders from the cliffs above, shattering every single ship and killing everyone aboard, except for Odysseus and his lone surviving crew. From there, the last ship fell into a gauntlet of surreal horrors. The men were temporarily transfigured into pigs by the witch Circe, forced to summon spirits in the underworld, and narrowly navigated past the hypnotic, lethal songs of the Sirens. Survival now required raw tactical sacrifice. To keep moving forward, Odysseus had to explicitly choose to sail close to the sea monster Scylla, feeding her 6 crewmen just to avoid losing the entire ship to a nearby whirlpool. The final breaking point arrived on the island of Thrinacia. A massive storm kept the battered crew stranded on the beaches for nearly a month, utterly exhausting their food supplies. Driven mad by starvation, the men waited for Odysseus to fall asleep to commit a final act of disobedience. They slaughtered and roasted the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios. The retribution was absolute. Once they finally set sail, Zeus struck the final ship with a thunderbolt that shattered the hull, drowning the mutinous crew and leaving Odysseus clinging alone to a piece of driftwood. Looking back at the timeline of the fleet's destruction, a pattern emerges. While divine wrath delivered the final strike, the army was actually dismantled by a steady sequence of human pride, mutiny, and the desperation of starving men. After surviving the wreck, Odysseus spent 7 years held captive by the goddess Calypso. Eventually, a sympathetic island nation known as the Phaeacians provided him a ship, and 20 years after leaving for Troy, he finally sails into the Bay of Ithaca. But the homecoming is a domestic nightmare. Over 100 noblemen have occupied his palace, butchering his livestock and demanding that his wife Penelope choose one of them to marry. Penelope had stalled these suitors using an intellect that matched her husband's. For 3 years, she promised to pick a suitor as soon as she finished weaving a burial garment, but every night she would secretly undo her daily progress in the dark. Knowing the suitors would assassinate the returning king on sight, the goddess Athena stepped in. She transfigured Odysseus into a decrepit, unrecognized beggar so he could safely walk through his own front door and assess who remained loyal. After surviving the wrath of the gods for 10 years, reclaiming his home would now rely entirely on grounded, human espionage. Penelope sets up one final, impossible challenge. She declares she will marry whoever can string Odysseus's legendary hunting bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through a row of 12 iron axe heads. One by one, every young nobleman failed to even bend the wood to attach the string. Then the disguised old beggar stepped up, strung the weapon with ease, and sent an arrow sailing flawlessly through all 12 targets. The hall fell completely silent. Odysseus drops his disguise, signals his son Telemachus to lock the great doors, and turns the weapon on the crowd. Working together, they systematically killed every suitor trapped inside the palace. With the hall quieted, Odysseus and Penelope finally embrace, ending 20 years of separation and anxiety. Homer's epic remains relevant because it tracks the specific cost of a 20-year absence. It follows a man who outwitted gods and giants, only to find his most difficult challenge was the quiet, exhausting work of reclaiming a home that had moved on without him.